Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about a lot of things. I typically talk about astrology, but I also love to delve into different conversations about different types of modalities that are also seen as healing. Among those, there's all sorts of things that fall underneath that umbrella. If you know who followed me, I have been in lots of different conversations with people who deal with the esoteric arts, and I'm a very big supporter of them. My guest will be on in a few minutes. Before I get started, I want to remind you about my weekly newsletter that goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there you'll find the mundane astrology for the week and all the aspects that occur and pertain to those of you individuals, each of the individual signs. And also my websites are chrisflisher.com, turningofthewheel.com, and turningofthewheel.tv. And on there you'll find all kinds of information, educational information about astrology and other metaphysical arts as well. So without further ado, let's get my guest on. My guest is Kiera Fogg. She's the author of a book called Crystal Gridwork, The Power of Crystals and Sacred Geometry to Help Heal, Protect, and Inspire People. It's an interesting subject I found fascinating. I love the sacred geometry angle because I'm very fond of sacred geometry, and I believe that it's a real attribute to the world and all of us who are involved in it. She's a writer, a speaker on modern wellness and spirituality, and a certified Reiki practitioner. Her company, Little Box of Rocks, offers a healing crystal collection designed to celebrate life's most magical occasions. Her collections have been featured in Goop, O Magazine, the Oprah Magazine, Vogue, People, and Good Housekeeping. So it's a great pleasure to have you on today, Kiera. Welcome to Turning of the Wheel.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love the idea of using sacred geometry and the power of crystals together. And I'm curious how you sort of stumbled upon this, or maybe you didn't stumble. Maybe this is part of your DNA. But I'm curious how you came to work to this way.
Well, I sort of I find that most people who are into crystals kind of have like a catalyst moment.
Yeah.
That sort of awakens them, and then they get really curious. Mm-hmm. And that moment happened for me in my mid-20s. I was a stay-at-home mom of 3 boys, all under the age of 4. Uh-huh. And I found myself really struggling. I loved being a mom, loved my kids, but there was just something missing. And I found that I started to have anxiety. Like I actually went into a grocery store one day and had a panic attack for the first time. Didn't know what was happening, but I figured that it was sort of a sign to really pay attention and tune in to, what was really going on. And I think a lot of times people were so disconnected from how we really feel, like we kind of just push forward in life and don't kind of stop and tune in. So that was kind of my moment. And I had always loved crystals. I was born in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada.
That's way up, isn't it? That's pretty far north, isn't it? Yeah, north. You're way in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, right? And it's the amethyst capital of Canada.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up camping and exploring and finding amethyst and pyrite, that way, and had a little rock collection, as most kids do. But I never really knew that crystals were known to have these sort of metaphysical, energetic properties. And so at this time, when I started to have the panic attacks, I heard that if you carry a piece of sodalite in your pocket, it's supposed to help. So that was my first crystal, and I started carrying it, and I found that it did help. And I started, visiting the local crystal shops and collecting crystals, and soon enough I had them all over my house. And I didn't really get into building crystal grids until a little bit later on. Mm-hmm. But what I really found, I'm not the kind of, I'm not like a psychic, or like I'm definitely intuitive and spiritual, but I'm not an astrologer. I'm not a, like medium or anything like that. But what I really loved was that while crystals and sacred geometry it sort of sounds like a really complex kind of thing that maybe should be relegated for the psychics and the medium. It's actually pretty simple, and I started using it as just sort of a way, like another way to connect. Sort of like yoga or, anything else like that.
Well, it's very grounding, I think. I think the fact that they're from the earth and they've got these very sort of, I believe crystals have an amazing amount of power to them. And I think perhaps being born and raised where you were introduced to them at a very young age, I suspect, and they probably have greater meaning, especially being in a climate like that where you can almost feel their presence, I imagine, where you live in that part of the world, correct?
Well, yeah, and I think without even really knowing it as a child, I would go out into the wilderness, and that's where I would connect. Like I felt spiritually connected, and I didn't really even know that is what was happening. But I mean, even now, when I go into nature, it's something that you can definitely feel.
Right. Yeah, and it's nice to keep that connection. I mean, it's something it's part of us. I think we in our modern day lives are very reluctant to do that. I think we sort of forget how powerful our effect is when we are immersed in nature. We really forget all about that because we're wrapped up in everything else we're doing. But I think that the idea of, one of the reasons I was drawn to your subject was because I studied architecture and I studied sacred geometry, and I understand, the power of crystals. And so this has always been appealing to me as I've got a lot of crystals in my house as well. And I don't perhaps treat them the way you do, which maybe I should. It's something I could learn from you would be to how to respect them more. I don't pay homage to them in the way that perhaps I should. I don't, envelop them in any sort of ritual. But they're there. Well, they're there in my house.
What's interesting is that people, I hear that all the time. Like, we just had our book launch, and it was a live event. We did a little podcast, and we had people asking questions. And one of the most common questions we get is, well, what do I do with my crystals?
Right.
Like, what am I supposed to do? And people are so concerned that they're doing it wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that I really hope to kind of change. Like, even with my company, I really wanted to make crystals something that's really easy and accessible, and I wanted people to really trust that there really is no wrong way to use them.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I mean, when I say ritual, I know that there's, sort of the whole logic and the premise of your book is that you take these crystals, put them into a geometric grid, a wide variety of different grids, in order to bring about a certain quality or healing or presence or whatever. So there is a ritual to that, but it's not necessary to do that, in other words.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm looking at your website now, and I see a whole bunch of sacred geometry.
Yeah, no,
on every page.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've always loved the. Because astrology really is a geometric study, believe it or not. I mean, if you may not know that, but those of us who study astrology, it is all based on mathematics, which I think is the undercurrent and the sort of the connecting core or principle of the entire universe. I mean, there's such things that really fascinate me. I mean, when you see the geometry working and how it manifests, like perhaps when you see an eclipse of the sun, when the moon just passes over the sun so perfectly and fits it absolutely right to the edge, you have to know that something has a larger, some sort of larger presence or power is at work here when you see that precision. Yeah. And so this same thing with sacred geometry speaks to me in the same way because it brings about that same sort of, logic that is embedded in our whole DNA and our whole structure of the entire planet and the universe for that matter. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So, I think it's fascinating. Now, I love the fact that now when it's one thing to understand crystals and to be, fond of them because you were growing up in that part of the world, but what drew you to the idea of then bringing in sacred geometry? Is that something that you sort of stumbled upon, or is that something you researched, or?
I think that was something, I first stumbled upon it, like, on Pinterest.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah.
I remember seeing these beautiful pictures and just thinking, like, well, what is this? Like, is it art? Because it's really beautiful when you look at it. And then sort of looking into it, at first I thought, well, this is just really way too complex for me. This is something that's, going to be out of my realm. Mm-hmm. But when I started doing, a little bit more research, I found that it's actually quite easy. Really, all a crystal grid is you pick a shape that you're drawn to, and then you pick crystals that you're drawn to, and then you place them in that shape. So people are always really overwhelmed. Like, well, what is a crystal grid? Like, how do I do it? How do I figure it out? Where do I put the crystals? The book that I wrote, I intended to sort of break it down and make it really easy for people, but there really is no wrong way to do it.
Right, and so the form that you pick is really one that is up to your own judgment or whatever it calls to you, and whatever speaks to you. Now, when you're making a crystal grid work, is there a correlation between the design that you chose, like the pattern that you choose, and the crystals that you then put into that grid work?
Yeah. So there's crystals that have different purposes, and they work better for different shapes and meanings.
Mm-hmm.
But shapes have the same. They have those same kind of metaphysical, as you know, being an astrologer.
Right.
They have their own properties as well. So, let's say if we want to connect with our angels, if we want to hear our spirit guides, that kind of thing, a triangle is a really great shape. And what's interesting about that is you can look back in history and you can see that used over and over again in sacred temples and pyramids and whatnot. So that has been traditionally a way to connect with God, the temple shape.
Right,
so
right. And all the
when I started to look,
and all the major big sort of spiritual or structures in the world, like the famous cathedrals in Europe and even the pyramids in Egypt and Machu Picchu and Angkor Wat, all these famous spiritual places have this distinct sacred geometry component as part of their underpinnings. This is where they're derived. We know this is very ancient. It goes back centuries to when man was first designing. So there's something very organic and natural about it, which I think is fascinating, because it does really, as we evolve further, it does allow us to see that maybe there's something more at work here than we realize. There's an underpinning of logic that goes here. And I think what you're trying to do is you're trying to speak to that and draw that energy into someone in an effort to help heal them or to provide comfort, as you say, or to inspire, all the above.
Yep, that's exactly it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, the idea of now, you must agree or must think that each crystal has its own separate qualities to them, and certain crystals have certain qualities that other crystals don't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's interesting is that when I started researching for my company, because I had to learn an awful lot about crystals to start my company,
right,
was that crystals have hundreds of different meanings. Like they each carry so many different meanings, and so they can really quite easily be combined for a variety of different purposes.
I see.
One of the best crystals for like a good for everything crystal is the amethyst, because it's really just kind of great for anything you can really think of.
Mm-hmm. And but the pattern in which these are placed, that they have a certain vibration to them. Each crystal has a certain vibration. They vary based on the type of crystal that you're using. When those vibrations are put together, they sort of create a harmonic, for lack of a better word, a harmonic sort of presence that offers to the individual a sense of inspiration. Do you think that this is born out of these crystals? In other words, do you actually feel the impact of them? And when you're doing such a thing, do you feel the difference before and after?
See, what I love the most about crystals is that, like, I have a way of sort of explaining it that I'll say in a moment. But what I love is that we don't 100% know how they work, and that's actually one of the most beautiful things about it, because they really cause us to tune in and pay attention to how we're feeling. Because I think, while that seems like a very simple thing, I just think people don't do it. And we recently, like when we launched the book a couple of weeks ago, or last week, we set crystals out, and we gave a crystal to everybody who came, but the only condition was they couldn't know anything about the crystals. So we set them out, and they had to pick which one they were drawn to, and it was so interesting watching them, because they would, stand over certain crystals and say, oh, this one really makes me feel anxious, or this one really, like, I'm really drawn to this one. So I think that's the most beautiful thing about it, is that we don't really know how it works, but it does work. It seems like the customers that we have told me these just amazing stories about how crystals have impacted their lives. But on like a purely kind of scientific level, the easiest way that I found it described was, so humans are made up of vibrations.
Right.
And not only like one vibration, our whole body, like different organs have different vibrations. So your heart is going to have a different vibration than your liver.
Right.
So, and that vibration is always changing depending on our environment, the thoughts that we're thinking, like we're constantly just shifting energetically.
Mm-hmm.
So crystals, on the other hand, have a very constant and steady vibration, and it's not very easily affected. So when they are brought into our energetic space, they have the power to influence our energy, which is always changing.
Right. So it's sort of an interaction between the crystal and you. The vibration that the crystals emit is picked up by us.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that crystals have some like magical power over us.
Right.
They're a tool like anything else. And I mean, I can be in the most frazzled state and just be like a ball of stress and have crystals all around me because I work, like that's literally my job is
right.
I own a crystal shop. And sometimes like they don't influence me at all. It's when I tune in and really use them as a tool that they actually work.
Mm-hmm. So when your intention is right and you're focusing on them, you're sort of then opening yourself up to be receptive to the energy that they're providing.
Yes.
Would a person, you think, intuitively know which crystal they needed to go to? Like you mentioned, someone getting anxious because they went near a crystal. They would probably avoid that in the future and go to a different one. So they this is a sort of a very cognizant, iterative interaction with a person when they go to a crystal and say, "Wow, this makes me feel good," or "This doesn't make me feel good."
Yeah, and that's one of the most common questions we get too.
Is what the idea of the crystal being not as powerful or as present as always as others, more so.
Okay. Well, I don't remember. Why don't you ask the question again?
Well, the idea was that if certain crystals have certain qualities that are given out. If someone is anxious near a crystal, what is that saying about the crystal? What is that saying about the person? I wonder. So it's sort of the interaction between the crystal and the individual.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if somebody is anxious near a crystal, then that's your body or your own vibration telling you to stay away from that specific energy. Maybe you're not ready for it yet. Mm-hmm. But the easiest way, I mean, I get asked all the time, how do I start my own crystal collection from people who've never really interacted with them before. And the easiest way to do that is to just really go into a shop and just kind of tune in and pay attention to what you're drawn to, because I always see time and again people will come in for a specific purpose, and I won't tell them which crystals to pick, and they'll end up picking the exact right one that I would have recommended for that.
And you think that they're drawn to that by what they can feel. There's sort of an exchange between the two people, between the crystal and the person.
Yeah, our energetic systems tell us far more than we really give them credit for, and that's the beautiful thing about crystals is that it really causes us to tune into that.
So you think that the crystals have the ability to penetrate some sort of thought process of our own? So in other words, the energy that they're emitting is enough to alter the consciousness or the feelings or the whatever the situation is with the individual. There's a direct relationship between the two.
I think there's a relationship with the right intention. I don't think that they can come in and alter. I think when we can focus our own intentions, I think our minds are extremely powerful, but when we can focus and align our intentions with the energy of a crystal, they are an amazing tool that can really help us.
Yeah. And what have you found? Do you have any stories that sort of relate to that about, sort of people who've had remarkable experiences, or even yourself, where you have a story of what happened, a certain situation that happened and the crystal stepped in and sort of resolved something?
I have had people, countless stories. My close friend, her son was having really bad nightmares, and I told her to keep a moonstone, and this is a story that I tell in the book. He kept a moonstone with him, and the nightmares resolved, and it turned out he was actually being bullied at school. But the stories are, it's not, I don't necessarily hear, the magical, I tucked a crystal in my pocket, and, everything is all good. Mm-hmm. But what is really interesting is that the people, they'll come and tell me that, my sister had, she was going through chemotherapy, and I gave her these crystals, and it brought her to tears, and she kept the crystals with her through the entire treatment. And I just think that's so beautiful, because if a rock, like something as simple as a rock, can be with you in that kind of moment in your life, like the battle of your life, can actually bring inspiration. I just think it's so amazing.
It is. And I've heard stories similar to that, other people I've spoken to, and that there's real power there. You can feel, I've picked up crystals, and you can just, my hand starts to vibrate. You can just feel that coming through there. And
really?
Yeah. It's really very profound and very powerful. And I think that when you take these same profound sort of, these objects of the earth and put them into a format such as sacred geometry, you really are fusing two modalities together to create a healing tool, an inspirational tool as well, which can be really quite moving and very effective overall. I think there's really great logic there.
Well, and it's something that I think can really work subconsciously as well. I had actually one of the first crystal grids that I built was one that I have in the book, and it's called the Success Grid. And I built it right when I started my company, like right when I had the idea and started doing all the research for it. And then I completely forgot about it. But it was set up in my office, and I would walk past it every day. And then when my company took off, it happened pretty much like overnight. It was like after 2 months of being in business, we were featured in Gwyneth Paltrow's gift guide, and then Cameron Diaz's gift guide, and then it was like I turned on the TV and saw my face, like it was like a avalanche.
That's great, yeah.
I ended up going into my office one day, and I looked at the grid that I built, and I was like, wow. It's not like I was sitting at that grid every day doing the affirmation that I wrote, but who knows?
No,
seems like it worked.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that makes a lot of. I mean, that's what you need. You need to get those moments, what I call an aha moment, in order to come to that conclusion and say, "Wow, something really did work here." We all have different touchstones. No pun intended. We have different touchstones there of how these things manifest in our life. Sometimes they could be a meeting of a person. Other times it could be a vision you have. There could be some sort of synchronistic event that happens to you. But they are reminders. They're sort of subtle, natural taps on our shoulders that can say, yes, you're going the right way. And you need that affirmation in order to follow through, in order to feel as if you're actually doing the right thing.
Yeah. Well, and it's so important to tune in. I remember before, it was like maybe a couple months before I had the idea to start my company, I remember I had a dream, and it was this this is going to sound crazy, but it was a hematite sphere was like following me around in my dream, and it was a little pixie. It was like buzzing around, and I was like, what is that? And I woke up and I Googled it and realized that, you can actually buy these little hematite spheres, and so I bought one, and that became one of my favorite crystals. So I think the universe is always speaking to us, and it's so important that we take the time to tune in, because had I not tuned in that moment when I was in the grocery store and had a panic attack, my life would have gone on a completely different path.
Huh. Yeah,
I might have still been a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, well, nothing wrong with either, but still, this sort of awakening for you, like an epiphany of sorts, was really valuable in order to have that.
Right.
And that, and what I think is interesting about your book is that you divide them up into different kinds of qualities, and I'd like to discuss some of them if we could. And then we'll get into the grid maybe in the second half of the show. But you have, they're divided up. One of the questions most people probably have is, how do I know which crystal is right for me? And what am I trying to do? So you have to be able to counsel people in that regard. So let's just go through some of them. Let's start out with the seeker crystals. What will the seeker crystals do for you, for example?
The seeker crystals, they are when we're looking for something, that we don't already have. So when we're kind of relying on the energy of that crystal to go out and find something. It's exactly like the word. So you're going to turn to those crystals when you're looking for something that you don't already have, and you want that energy to kind of go out and find it for you.
I see. Now, there's a wide array of crystals that fall under that category. Are ones better than others? Or are they?
No. I mean, I would go back to just kind of tuning into what you're drawn to. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are going to be crystals depending on what you're trying to find. Like if you're looking for love, you're going to pick a different crystal than, if you're looking for success, that type of thing.
Right.
But that's all. I mean, the great thing about the book is that I've kind of taken all the guesswork out of it, because I really wanted this to be a book for people who didn't feel like experts, because I didn't feel like an expert. I just felt like somebody, a mom and a business owner who wanted to benefit from a healing modality too.
Right, and so this is the way to do it. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
And so within that array, you'd decide, for secret crystals, this is sort of to manifest goals and desires. You'd find one and then you put your intention behind that, and sort of have that as part of it.
That's right.
Yeah, the attractor crystals are more about sort of how do you draw what you want to you, correct?
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's more like it's almost like a magnet. So it's instead of going out and sending that energy out to get something, you're sort of drawing the energy inward. And secret crystals and attractor crystals really pair great together.
I can see that. Yeah, they sort of complement each other very well. I could see that. When we move on to like the enhancer crystals, this is an interesting one, I think, because this allows you to sort of take what you've already got and perhaps kick it up a notch, right?
Yeah, so this is like you're wanting to improve your circumstances and sort of magnify what you already have. So these work really great on grids of when we want to just be grateful and gratitude, but also just self-improvement. Like if we're looking to build on our self-confidence, enhancer crystals work really well for that.
They're some of my favorite
and
ones.
And they're actually, if you go and you look at like the actual crystal lattice structure, like the energy, they're actually built in blocks, and so they're called the building block crystals, which sort of makes sense, is that you're building on what you already have.
Yeah, they're in. And some of my favorite crystals are in there. I love lapis lazuli, and I love pyrite as well. Those are both. Pyrite is also called.
Pyrite is one of my favorite crystals.
It's called fool's gold, correct? That's what it used to be called.
That's right.
Yeah, there we go.
That's right. Yeah.
Next one are the guardian crystals. Those are also nice. You've got that wonderful. How do you say? What's the word? I can't pronounce it. I guess it's malachite. I love that green malachite color.
Yep. Yep. And malachite is actually poisonous if you eat it. So. Oh. A little tip.
And
Don't eat it.
Okay, I wasn't planning on it, but anyway, these are. This is sort of for maintaining, protecting what we have. In other words.
Yes. Yes. So similar to the building block crystals, these are ones that we want to just protect our current circumstances. So it's great if you want. It's sort of like building like a fence, and like you kind of want to like protect. You do that when you want to protect your home. So you're just wanting to guard what you already have.
I see. Not lose, not go backwards, and just protect that which you have.
Yep.
Interesting. The barrier crystals are preventing misfortune and sort of prevention from negativity. Now, these would be something that people might take proactively if they wanted to protect something they already had. Maybe they're not facing danger, but they're trying to prevent something from being taken from them.
That's exactly it. Well, you're explaining it better than me.
Well, I'm sort of using your book as a guide, so I'm cheating in some ways. But and so someone would use this in the case of what? This would be more the case of, they're successful, they have a house, everything is there, they don't want to lose it, so they would perhaps use this to help prevent that.
Yeah, and this is maybe the crystal to turn to if you're maybe a worrier. So if you're kind of thinking about specific misfortunes, these are the good crystals to turn to prevent those things from happening.
Yeah, I noticed moonstone is in here, so that must have been what worked well for your son's friend. Yeah, right. Okay, because they were worried about being bullied.
Right, because he was having the nightmares, and it was from the bullying.
Oh, wow, interesting. So it really actually worked for him very well. Now, would he have done well with another one of the same ones, you think? The other ones in that grouping of the barrier crystals?
Well, the reason I suggested moonstone is because moonstone is really good for children.
Okay, it's smooth. It's nice.
And I have 3 boys, and they each have their own special piece of moonstone. So, and it's a very calming and soothing crystal. Great for balancing the emotions. And I figured, well, if he's kind of stressed out and having these nightmares, then that would probably help.
Yeah, no, seems like it works well. Then we move on to the dispeller crystals. These are sort of eliminating unwanted circumstances. And these would be for use of, what would you use these for? If you were traveling, for example, or what would you use them for?
Well, this is like if we're experiencing a lot of stress. So if you want to restore sort of health and wellness, if you want to rebalance your energy, these are the crystals to turn to. And it makes sense because a lot of the blue crystals fall into this category. And those crystals are always great for sort of getting us back to that peace of mind and balance and connecting with our divine wisdom.
So would someone come to you, for example, and say, I need help and this is what's bothering me? What would you recommend? You'd sort of do that service as well? Or you just you don't see yourself as a practitioner?
I don't feel like I am. See, that's where I think a lot of the misconception is. Like, people kind of look at me like, "Oh, you're the crystal lady," and I am. Like, but I really feel like I'm a mom and a businesswoman who uses crystals as a wellness modality. I feel like it's important to find ways, no matter what that is, to stay connected, and I think it's our job. Like, it's our responsibility, just like it's our responsibility to maintain our physical health. It's our responsibility to connect with our spiritual health, and that's going to be different for everybody. So I don't see myself as the crystal lady who, like, although I end up doing that a lot because I just know a lot about crystals. Mm-hmm. I'm not I'm not the psychic, and I'm not the person who has all the answers. I always point back to how do you feel? Like, what do you think that you need? Because that's all I'm doing. Right.
And I think you probably, having years of experience in this field, you would sort of even get a feel, maybe even an intuitive tug that says, wow, this person could really use this, or this could, So that, you're sort of using your intuition. You are engaging with the client in that regard, so you actually do have that.
I am, but what I really don't like is that I feel like people naturally go to, oh, well, you have the answer. You're the expert. You have the answer. And I really don't like that, because I don't want to take that
responsibility.
Power. Right. Well, and not only that, but I don't think it serves people. I don't think it serves people if I'm telling them what to do. I really think the key is to tune into what you need, because you always have the answer. I don't.
Right. And of course, you'd have to know the person very well to understand what's going on with them, what their needs are. That's very personal. That's sort of a subject they have to carry on with themselves. Really interesting.
Yep.
We're talking today with Kiera Fogg. She is the author of Crystal Gridwork, The Power of Crystals and Sacred Geometry to Heal, Protect, and Inspire. Fascinating subject. Many of us take for granted what we see in the way of crystals, or we don't even know about them, but they certainly do have power. I can attest to that, and it's interesting. Her websites are littleboxofrocks.com, which is a great name. I love that. And also Kiera Fogg, KIERAFOGG.com. Both those sites will get you to the book, and we'll be back in a few minutes to complete our discussion. I want to get into some of the grids that you've laid out, and we'll talk about that when we get back, okay? We'll be right back, folks, in about 2.5 minutes.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today. Or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
Hi, your host, Chris Flisher here. I've been producer and host of this podcast and radio show for the past 10 years. My goal has always been to provide enlightening, progressive, and logical discussions about where we are as a species and how we move ourselves further down the road towards our greater potential. I believe astrology provides a great tool for observing our progress and awakening our consciousness to becoming a whole, better, and more complete individuals. I have sought to invite the best contemporary guests, thought leaders, and progressive minds to discuss topics that concern us all, regardless of your beliefs. Consider, making a contribution through PayPal to help keep the great wheel turning so that I can continue for the next 10 years along the same enlightened path. As always, I thank you for your support.
Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. We're talking today with Kiera Fogg. She's the author of a book called Crystal Gridwork, The Power of Crystals and Sacred Geometry to Heal, Protect, and Inspire. Her name is Kiera Fogg, F-O-G-G. Her websites are littleboxofrocks.com and kierafogg.com. So, Kiera, I was looking through your book, and I'm interested in the geometric patterns that you incorporate in your book, because this really is a discussion about not just the crystals, but how they are presented, how they are laid out in a grid work that will then perhaps manifest even a greater outcome than maybe they would by themselves. So that is the premise of the grid work. The grid work is sort of a collaboration of crystals together working in a grid to bring about even a greater outcome than perhaps a single grid could by itself, correct?
Right, working in a grid with us.
With us, okay, yeah.
So that's the key, yeah.
Right. So the very first one, which is a very familiar one to me, because I draw a lot of mandalas, the first one I see is the Seed of Life, which has this sense of these great, geometrical, it's all based on the circle, of course, and I love the circle. That's what astrology is all about. Life is a manifestation of a cyclical event. We go through cycles of life. We come around, and history is nothing more than a giant corkscrew going around and around and around as we move forward. The scene changes, but the situation is always the same. We go through these cycles and patterns in life, and we end up there. So to see this one Seed of Life is based on that is fascinating. And tell me a little bit about what made you choose this shape.
Well, the Seed of Life is a really great one for manifesting dreams and goals, but it's kind of like that good for everything shape, just kind of like the amethyst that I was talking about before.
Right. Uh-huh.
It's really good because it has all the circles. It really is great for a whole bunch of things, promoting harmony, great for relationships, enhancing creativity, attracting luck. So you can feel pretty safe if you choose the Seed of Life.
It's sort of your one-size-fits-all grid, I guess, or your shape.
Yeah.
You're using one. Okay. The next one that's fascinating to me is the Flower of Life. This is more of a based on the similar idea, but even to a greater extent. It's based on a number of architectural lines like the Vesica Piscis and the Metatron's Cube. Also very strong, powerful things. And this one is used for what now?
So this one, if you actually look close, you'll find a whole bunch of other shapes within the shape, like you were mentioning.
Right.
But this one is really great for promoting self-knowledge and self-confidence. So if you're struggling with self-worth, self-expression, that kind of thing, this is a wonderful shape for that.
I love that. And of course what you do is you would draw the pattern, or at least imagine the pattern or follow the pattern, then place your crystals there, and you sort of get it's sort of the crystals on steroids, for lack of a better term, right? It's sort of,
I like that.
Kind of kicks them up a notch.
Well, and one of the things that we really I worked really closely with the publisher, and we wanted it to be the book is all, you can flat lay it and photocopy it,
right,
so that you can actually take these shapes and you don't have to worry. You can just take a photocopy and then place your crystals on it, or you can go to the pre-made shapes and actually just get the crystals in the picture and just place them right on the picture.
Right. I have a firm belief in the power of the illustration and the visual that these grid works that you're coming up with, because I think there's a lot to be said for these are natural shapes that are really, at some level, you don't always know why, but they certainly seem to resonate with the human being. And you just say, wow, why is this figure so powerful? And when I draw mandalas, I'm always drawn to this same sort of structure, these cyclical interlacing structures that have these lines that seem to just match up perfectly every time. And I love that.
So you draw mandalas?
I do, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
on
my website, you'll see there's a whole section of art. They've got a whole bunch of them there, which I could actually see myself using them and then applying crystals to my own patterns and getting something out of that as well. So,
that would be amazing.
Yeah, so that's the Flower of Life, another good all-purpose kind of go-to grid.
Yep.
The next one is the Vesica Piscis. I always have a hard time. Vesica, you could probably pronounce it better.
Pisces. Yeah,
Pisces. I always say
Pisces.
Right. Thank you. Very good. I get it confused because I think of Pisces, the astrological sign. So go ahead.
Yeah.
So this is for improving relationships?
Yeah, so this one's really simple. So it's two circles that are intertwined. And this one's really great for promoting harmony in relationships. So like the romance grid that I have on there is based on this shape. And if you're having issues with a friend or a colleague, this is a really good one for kind of reuniting people and bringing them back together.
Yeah, and I love the fact, and it's funny because I've been tripped up on this ever since I was a kid. I know it's Pisces, but I think of it spelled differently, so I always get confused by it. But it is. My father was a minister, and I used to see this symbol all the time around the church because it does represent the two fishes, which of course relates back to Pisces, and that's where you get that.
That's right,
sort of the divinity of that cycle of the comings and goings and of life.
Yeah.
And
of rebirth
and transformation. Yeah, really interesting. That's a really good one. That's a very old and ancient architectural structure as well, which of course was used in cathedrals and churches all throughout Europe and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. Then we get to one which is really complicated. It's called the circle. The basic circle.
Well, and I even wondered, like, should we put this in the book because it's so simple, but it's such a powerful shape.
That's very powerful. It's sort of the essence of everything.
Exactly. So this is another one for that's really great for strengthening friendships, commitment. This is a great one. My restful sleep grid is based on this shape because it's just a great shape for harmony. Kind of realigning.
And it's really, I think it's a metaphor in some ways, or at least an illustrative metaphor of what we are all faced with in our lives. We live in a cyclical world. We come into the world, we leave the world. That's a gigantic circle. And everything around us is based on, we have this circle of friends, the circle of community, the circle of family. All those things are very indicative of that. So it's a very powerful, and I'm glad you chose to keep it in. So it's a really powerful one.
Yeah. I love how you explain that.
Another one that's a favorite of mine is the spiral. I love the spiral because that, as I mentioned earlier, is just like our journey through life. It's that big circle, that big spiral.
Yeah, and this one is really great for improving health. The health grid is based out of this shape. Also, just for restoring, like if you're feeling really stressed out, this is a great one. One of my favorite grids in the book is one made on the spiral, and it has these beautiful seashells, and I just love it. But which is funny because if you look at a seashell, you'll see spirals, and that's the other thing is we haven't mentioned is that if you look at nature, even the beehive and the flowers or pine cones, sacred geometry is really everywhere. Even if you look at if you hold up your hand and look at your hand, you'll see the spiral. So it's quite amazing.
It's all there. It's amazing. It's sort of the golden mean. That's sort of that architectural term that refers to the logic that you find in the nautilus shells. You'll see it in trees. You'll see it in flowers. You'll see it in bees. You'll see it in our own. It's all everywhere. It's everywhere. You just have to find it and look for it and be aware of it. Yeah. One of the other ones I'm always fond of is the triangle. The triangle is very powerful because it gives you that sense of a three-legged support, which is a very big piece of the astrological component. But this is good for what?
This is good for connecting with our higher selves or our angels. So, like we were talking about before, churches are built on this in this structure because it sort of symbolizes reaching up to the sky or reaching up to our highest selves and connecting with that, sort of that mind, body, spirit connection. And so this one is really good for when you're seeking wisdom, like when you want insights from your angels or from your guides or your higher power. It's really great for that.
Yeah, and it sort of has that, if you think of it visually, it's pointing upward, it's towards the sky, it's sort of reaching towards something, sort of like an antenna almost, so, bring down to me what I need, that sort of thing. I like that.
Yeah, and for that reason, it's also good for manifesting new. It's because it sort of brings in that new energy. It points upwards and draws that energy down. It's good for manifesting new goals and desires. And
when we look at someone who's meditating, it's sort of sitting cross-legged on the floor, that's the sort of the shape that they make. So it's very...
That's true.
It's a very much of a sort of a spiritual, ritual kind of shape that needs to be
and even if you think of the shape your hands take when you put them into prayer,
of course, exactly,
that would be the triangle.
Same thing, very much so. The square is a big piece of in astrology. That's what we know. We do that quite a bit in astrology. We see that all through the astrology charts. And it typically represents challenges and hardships or lessons that we're supposed to learn. And the idea is that as we think of the square as a 90-degree angle. We think of it as a stair, and every time you take a step up, you're making progress in some way. That's how it works in metaphorically. But I'm curious how you see it here. Yeah.
Well, traditionally, or how I've interacted with the square in my grids has been sort of with that protective element. So I picture it sort of like a fence, there's different levels of boundaries that if you want to build a fence and keep it out. So I use it for protection, but it's also great for just enhancing a feeling of self-confidence. So we do have a self-confidence grid that's in the shape of a square because it's a very stable shape. So it really does kind of provide that energy of stability and structure and confidence.
Yeah, it's very much of a foundational structure. You find it in architecture. You find it as this is how basic things work. It's where those points meet. And the idea is that where the corners meet, there's that sense of, in architecture, if you went to a door and you went to a corner where there's a 90-degree angle, that's where the tension rests. But in that tension is this great energy that is there, that is supportive, and that's why that really works well for that type of idea.
Yeah.
Now, the next one is interesting, is the cross, which, of course, we think of as, with Christianity, but most of the major cathedrals in the world are set this way, and I'm curious what this one it brings to you.
This one is really wonderful if you're seeking forgiveness or if you're looking to atone for something. This is one it's a very healing shape. It's definitely thought of as a Christian shape, but it's also really great for if you really want to heal something in your life that's really bugging you, if you just want to forgive yourself. This is a really wonderful one.
Yeah,
and also for healing, overcoming addictions.
Okay, good.
It's really great for that. Yeah.
Huh, wow. The Star of David is a very famous one. We see this in the big circle, and this is sort of two triangles, one inverted on top of the other, which gives it that wonderful, sort of again drawing on the triangle as well as the circle.
And because it has the repeated triangles, this one, when we spoke about the triangle before, that was about bringing in the new. Well, this is like magnified bringing in the new. So this is a really wonderful one for rejuvenation.
Yeah.
So there's a stress release grid in the book, and it's built on the Star of David. And this is always my go-to shape whenever I want to build a grid for stress. If I'm feeling overwhelmed or just kind of wanting to reset, this is the shape.
Oh, interesting. Wow. The next one is the Ashoka chakra, which refers back to sort of the chakras. This is a very busy one, but also very powerful in itself because it has that sort of. It's a very much of a mandala in itself. And what's going on with this?
So much is going on with this. This is one of my favorite shapes. Yeah. One of my favorite ways to use this one is for strength and power. I love to put the obsidian arrowhead on this one because it's just if you see it in the book, it's the power grid, and it's just my favorite one. But this one, it's connected to our moral virtues traditionally. So if you want to realign with any kind of moral virtue, this is the one to pick. Yeah. So if you want to channel courage or any kind of virtue that you can think of. Right. This is the one. And
if you've ever been to a museum of science where they had a pendulum or something like that, you would see that these patterns are formed based on the rotation of the Earth. You'd see the pendulum going back and forth, and this is sort of the pattern you would see evolving. Which again gives strength to the logic of the idea that we are perhaps not in charge here, and there's some greater power. It really is fascinating. The next one is the Borromenian rings, and I find this fascinating because this is sort of what we look at when we think of the color wheel. We look at the red, green, and blue. We would see these colors overlapped, and this is sort of the three intersected rings. And what do they bring to the story?
So this is another one that's really great for cooperation, for teamwork, because it has the circle. But to put it your way, it's a circle on steroids.
Right. Okay.
So it is really, bringing all that energy together. So the energy of cooperation, this is one that I would recommend for an office who is, like a team building kind of thing. It's also really great for, in the book I have a motherhood grid that's based on this shape because it really promotes that harmony and balancing the emotions, the hormones, connecting with our children, that kind of thing.
So visually, you could think of this as three different circles that are intersected, and they all have an equal role in the overall
Yes.
picture, which is sort of like the idea. I mean, you can see lots of different things coming from this. You could see the three branches of government. You could see the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You could see the earth.
Yeah.
You could see the sun, the moon, and the ascent. You could see all kinds of things within this
Yep.
particular shape. And then finally, we come, looks like, to the tripod of life, which is similar in a way, but a different kind of, like more of an oval or a ellipse, I guess.
Sort of, yes.
Yeah.
This is the one that's, I have had friends that have had struggles getting pregnant, and I have a close friend who put this grid out in this shape, and she did get pregnant after, there was like 2 years of trying. So who knows if it was the grid, but this is one that is highly recommended if you're having any sort of struggles with fertility, because it really promotes that kind of that energy.
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And I think a lot of it, of course, like any sort of metaphysical modality, it does require the enrollment and requires our engagement with the modality. We've got to enter into it and sort of,
That's right.
You've got to be part of it. You can't just bring it and say, okay, do your work. You've got to be conscious and have the right intention in order to manifest what you want from that. So it is a participatory. Right. It's participatory in that regard. You've got to enter into the modality in order to get out what you want from it. So you've got to be. You can't just say.
Well, I truly believe that we are the power. I don't think it's the rocks. I mean, I'm like I said before. Like I can be surrounded by crystals and rocks all day long and be super stressed out and just be completely out of alignment.
Yeah.
And they don't affect me. But when I choose to realign and connect with how I feel and then use a crystal to help me. So I believe it is me that has the power, and it's the crystal that acts as the tool.
Yeah, no, I can see that. And then the rest of the book, you go in through all of the different sort of grids that you have you can pick, and these are sort of meant to be guideposts for people to sort of choose.
Yeah, so these just make it easy. This is like if you don't want to think, if you don't want to have to go and research what shape is best for what issue and what crystals are best for what issue. These are pre-made shapes that you can really just look at the picture and go out and get the crystals and put them right on the page.
Interesting. And I also noticed that you've incorporated other things other than crystals in the grid cycle, which you've got pine cones and flowers and shafts of wheat and stuff like that, and wildflowers and seashells, and these all sort of bring a different kind of intention to what you're looking for, I think, right?
Right, and I really encourage people, that's how I make it my own. So that's how you can really, you don't really have to follow a guide. Like, you really can just take a shape and place crystals on it and go kind of with how it makes you feel. So, but I really encourage people to take the book and then add whatever has meaning. So if it's like a necklace that they cherish, or a lock of hair of their children, whatever has meaning to them, it's all about what makes you connect.
Yeah, interesting. And it's kind of nice to have these because it does, I think you're right, you could actually make your own circle, but people probably would come to these as a way of finding what they needed. And this is sort of a good way of providing a guide for them to say, this is a suggestion you could use. I'm curious, do you find yourself on a regular basis drawing grids of your own on any particular day for any particular sort of, way you're feeling? Do you use them on a regular basis, or do you find yourself doing that?
I tend to set them out. I suggest always that you keep it out for 40 days. I don't know why it's 40 days. That's just how it's always been, and I've always done it. And
well, I like that.
How the ritual's done.
It's a cycle of Venus. It's a cycle of Venus, and it's in the Bible, 40 days and 40 nights. So it's got a strong
that makes sense.
Historical component to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and also just from a really practical standpoint, that's 30 days is how long it takes to form a habit. So 40 days is just kind of an effective thing. And I do find that when I set them out, I don't just leave them there. I tend to pass by them and I say the affirmation and sort of try to tune into their energy on a daily basis. And I think that's just a really great way to stay aligned with my own personal goals and intentions, for sort of an energetic intention as I go about my day.
Yeah, and it's sort of it's a good sort of it's kind of like some people get up in the morning and meditate, or they go for a walk,
Yep.
or they pray, or whatever they do,
Yes.
Tai Chi, whatever
Yep.
whatever your thing is, and that's
Yep.
in that sense of ritual is a certain sense of familiarity. It's predictable in some ways because you know that if you do this, you feel in a certain way. You're sort of putting your attention into that regard. So it's really got interesting components with that in that shape because of the fact that you are ritualizing it, and by ritualizing it and focusing there, then you certainly draw the power of intention to it, and so there it has a real sense of. I think you'd see results, and I think it's sort of like the idea, like you said, the habitualness of thinking a certain way,
Yeah.
rather than struggling to or worrying to how am I going to get money, how am I going to get a job. Turn that
Right.
same energy into positive affirmations, working with crystals that would then perhaps bring you closer to manifesting that when you least expect it. Perhaps it may just appear when
Right.
you.
Well, and the beautiful thing is, it's a really easy way to program your mind. I mean,
It
your
is, yeah.
mind is really what controls our actions, and it might look like this divine synchronicity, which it maybe is also just our actions. You
Yeah.
know, when we're constantly training our mind to stay focused on our highest intentions, we're going to take different actions, and so that's what's really wonderful about the crystal grid is that it's sort of like a piece of art. You set it out, and it draws your attention. You look at it, you think about why you chose to set it up in the first place, and it really does have the power to change your life.
Right. Well, so much of that is based on, like you say, the power of intention, and I think in our world, I think having this sort of I don't want to call it an altar, but it has altar-like qualities.
Yeah.
It sort of has,
sure.
sort of something that you have high reverence for and you pay homage to. And as a result,
Yep.
you're sort of turning yourself away from your cell phone and everything else that's bothering us these
Yes.
days, and putting it
Yes.
into something like this, which then I think which grounds it. And interestingly, because we're in a very confusing part of our lives. I think all of us in the world today, we're in a very uncertain times, and I think what the crystals do, and perhaps that's why I was interested in talking to you, was that they provide a very earthbound, because they are from the earth. They provide a very earthbound reminder, as well as a message from the earth that we can get through this in some way. There's a certain sense of hope in there, I think. Is
Assurance.
The
Yeah,
word.
I know
assurance.
what you mean.
Yeah.
I love how you put that.
It's sort of because it's foundational, it's grounding. We're coming from the earth. We are of the earth. We are of the universe. And so when we reach to embrace that in a different capacity, much the way, it would be for any sort of natural occurrence. People may have, work,
Yeah.
it has the same sort of characteristics to it. I do want to ask you a couple
Right,
of questions about the stones, though, themselves. If I didn't mean
Okay.
I didn't mean to cut you off there. If you had something to say.
No, go ahead. Yep.
Are these all local to you, or are you getting them from around the world?
They come from all over the world. Some of our amethyst comes from Thunder Bay, but it comes from Brazil, India.
Yeah.
We have some from Russia. They come from all over.
And you think about it, these are all part of our natural crust, our natural mantle of the earth. These come from the ground, and regardless of where they come from, they're very much a part of us. We may very well even be made of something like this. We may, we are stardust.
Some of them are billions of years old.
Right.
I remember camping with my dad. My dad is like an avid. He's like the nature man. So everything that I've kind of done outdoors, I've done with him. And I remember when I was a little girl, he would pick up a rock and he would say, "What's more important? Like, what's more important, me or this rock? Like, this rock is maybe 1 billion years old, millions and millions at least. So what's more important, me or the rock?" And he had a point.
Yeah, he does. It's a very interesting point. And I think
Yeah.
that in the rocks there may be memory of time in there. I mean, that's not inconceivable. Water, we have learned, contains memory, and this may be part of how we can find our roots and see where we came from and follow that path backwards. There's a real sense of. I think well, it sounds trite, maybe even past, like a cliche, but they really are grounding in that regard. They have a sense of
Very much.
stability
Very much so.
that's there, that holds them and holds our feet to the ground. And I think it serves as a constant reminder of where we are, how we're going, and how we can best turn our intention. And intention is really what it's all about. I mean, if we are ill-intended, we will probably have ill effects. But if we're well-intended, we will probably see the effects of that as well. So really interesting.
Right.
My guest today has been Kiera Fogg. Her name is Kiera, and her last name is Fogg, F-O-G-G. She's the author of a book that just got released called Crystal Gridwork, The Power of Crystals and Sacred Geometry to Heal, Protect, and Inspire. And I think the most important piece about this, I've got lots of books about crystals and I've got lots of books about sacred geometry, but I don't have a book that combines the two. And I think the fact that you're combining the two gives the crystals and the grids both an added leg up, so to speak. It enhances both modalities in a way that I think is mutually supportive in that regard.
Right. Well, and I really wanted to make it easy. So it really is a very practical, step-by-step approach to doing something that seems complicated, but really it's not.
Yeah. So do you carry a crystal on your body or your person or your pocket or your purse?
Oh, all the time.
Oh, you do?
Yep, all the time.
And do you have a favorite one that you carry?
Well, I'm holding a piece of kyanite right now. That one is really good for realigning the body's chakras.
Okay.
My favorite crystal is probably pyrite, just because it's a really good, like I'm an entrepreneur, so that's just a really good crystal. Yeah. Yeah, and I have that on my desk, and it's believed that if you place it on your desk, it infuses that space with positive energy, and I've had nothing but positive happen in my career. So, I mean, obviously it has its challenges, but it's been wonderful. So.
Oh, that's great. Really interesting. Again, my guest today has been Kiera Fogg with 2 G's. Her book is Crystal Gridwork. Her website is littleboxofrocks.com, which is a great name, as well as kierafogg.com. I encourage you to go there and see what happened. And I think if all of us started to work with crystals and the sacred geometry, we'd find that there's something very primal that comes through, which I think would probably be very supportive, regardless of where we are in our lives. You know, we think of ourselves as contemporary people living in a contemporary world, but these are ancient pieces of the universe that the wisdom and I think the power and the intention that comes with them are something that we should not lose sight of, because we probably need them now more than ever. So. That's great.
Yeah,
so, Kiera, thank you so much for coming on today. It's great to have you and talk to you and learn your love and knowledge of these wonderful crystals. And I'm going to rethink my association with crystals, my relationship with crystals. So I've got a lot of them in my house, and I've just got to find a way to perhaps rethink them. I'm going to rethink them. So I thank you for that.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, very good. Once again, littleboxofrocks.com and Kiera Fogg with 2 G's.com. I encourage you to look it up. Her book is Crystal Gridwork, The Power of Crystals and Sacred Geometry to Heal, Protect, and Inspire. And, you know, healing is one thing, protection is one thing, and inspiration is one thing. We need all three. So they're good things to adhere to. Thank you so much, Kiera, for coming on today. It's great to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Very
Take
good.
care.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.